Recruit, you think MFA makes you bulletproof? Wrong. An attacker can read your mail, raid your files, and live in your tenant without ever touching your password. No prompts, no push fatigue, just quiet theft. The trick is OAuth consent, apps you approve acting as you. Here's the deal. I'm going to show you how consent bypasses MFA, why tokens outlive password resets, and the single control that kills 80% of this. You'll lock user consent, require verified publishers, and push every risky request into an admin workflow. Move. We define the enemy, then erase it. What illicit consent grants actually are, and why MFA fails. All right, listen up. This is not credential theft, it's authorization abuse. Okay, so basically OAuth consent lets an application act on your behalf with scopes. You click accept on a tidy Microsoft page and boom, the app gets tokens to your data. The attacker doesn't log in as you, they operate as an app you blessed. That's the ambush. Why MFA fails? Simple. MFA protects authentication. Consent grants create tokens after a one-time dance. Those tokens keep refreshing with refresh tokens. You can reset the password. Enforce MFA doesn't matter. The app never reprompts like a user. It just trades refresh tokens for new access tokens until you revoke the grant. In other words, you lock the front door. You left a signed power of attorney in the mailbox. Here's the weird part. Device code flow makes it look legit. You see a Microsoft screen, enter a code, approve a helpful tool, and the consent lands. No shady form, no give me your password. Just a friendly scope list. If it includes offline access, that app gets persistence. If it includes mail, read or files. Read. All you just gave the intruder a reading room and a library card. Let's talk persistence. Refresh tokens extend sessions. Some apps ask for offline access specifically to survive long periods. If the app is granted delegated permissions, it acts as you. If an admin blesses application permissions, it acts as itself, no user context. That's a bigger blast radius. Admin consent to directory.readwrite.all. You call that secure. That's tenant-wide exposure, mailbox rules, file exfil, graph queries, directory changes, the works. Microstory. A user approves calendar helper asking for mail, read and offline access. Attacker never touches the user's password. They use Microsoft Graph with the app's token, read the inbox, pull attachments, and set a covert forwarding rule from their own infrastructure. Security forces a password reset and MFA registration. Nothing breaks. The app keeps pulling mail. Why? Because identity events aren't app permission events. Different lanes, different guards. Here's what most people miss. Delegated versus application permissions changes the stakes. Delegated is act as user. Application is act as service. Delegated can be limited to the user's data. Application, when granted to certain scopes, becomes tenant-wide. If an admin hits approve on an unverified app asking for high privilege scopes, you've issued a skeleton key. And yes, some attackers target admins or help desk staff with polished consent pages just for that one click. Think of it like badge access. MFA checks the person at the door. Consent grants create a vendor badge that opens rooms without escort. If the badge says, all rooms, congratulations, your data center now has a self-guided tour. The simple version is, authentication answers, who are you? Authorization answers, what can you do? This attack hijacks authorization. You keep arguing with the receptionist while the vendor loads the truck. Specific damage? Email read, send, files. Read, all to OneDrive and SharePoint. Calendar scraping, contacts harvest for next wave phishing, Teams, message, impersonation with chat. Read-write, directory. Read-write, all for identity pivoting. With privileged scopes, they can write app roles, add secrets, and build backdoors. MFA never fires because nobody's pretending to be a user logging in. Everything clicked when I realized resets don't revoke grants. You must revoke the OAuth consent at the service principal or grant object level. Until you remove the grant, the refresh token flow keeps working. That's why We forced sign out is theater. You didn't cut the cord, you just changed the Wi-Fi name. Now, drop and give me 3 rules burned into your cortex. Consent is an access decision, not a login. Tokens outlive passwords unless you revoke the grant. Admin consent can detonate your whole tenant. Remember this detail, it's going to matter. Offline access is a persistence flag. When you see it next to mail, read, files, or read, write, all, or directory, scopes, treat it like a live grenade. In a minute, we clamp consent at the source so the grenade never enters the building. Then we'll prove it with a case study and show you exactly where to hunt grants in logs. Move. The non-negotiables. Set these 3 Entra controls now. User consent, verified publishers, admin consent workflow. All right, listen up. Controls win wars. You're going to set 3 Entra policies today, not tomorrow. Today. Because every minute you wait, some productivity booster app is siphoning mail like a hungry raccoon. Rule number 1. Lock down user consent. You open this valve only for low-risk scopes, or you shut it off entirely. In Entra Admin Center, go to Enterprise Applications, Consent and Permissions. User Consent Settings. Pick Allow User Consent for apps from verified publishers for selected permissions. Or, if your environment can handle it, do not allow user consent. That's the gold standard. Why? Because consent is an access decision. You don't let random apps decide their own privileges. You define a safe list of low-impact scopes. User. Read OpenID profile, maybe basic read of presence, and that's it. Everything else goes to the adults table. Here's what most people miss. Selected permissions is where you make or break this. Build a permission grant policy that includes low-risk scopes only. Exclude offline access. Exclude files. Read, all, mail, read, write, directory. If an app needs persistent access or broad data read, it is not low risk. Treat offline access like a smoke grenade banned for user consent. You want productivity? Fine, you still obey least privilege. Rule number 2, require verified publishers. You call that app trustworthy? Where's the publisher verification badge? If it's unverified, it doesn't get user consent. Period. Verified publishers have gone through Microsoft's process to prove ownership. Is it perfect? No. But it raises the bar and filters out a ton of junkware and throwaway phishing apps. In Entra, enable the policy. Only apps with verified publisher status can receive user consent, and only for the low-risk scopes you approved. This forces attackers to either escalate to admin consent or fail at the door. Either way, you get visibility. Now drop and give me the big one. Rule number 3, enable the admin consent workflow. This is your elevation lane with headlights, brakes, and a steering wheel. Turn it on. Set approvers. Require justification. Require business owner. Require expiration for approvals. When a user hits an app that needs risky scopes, mail, read, files, read, write, all, directory. Read, write, all. The workflow collects context and routes to the approvers with the app name, publisher status, requested scopes, and impact. This stops the one-click oops that hands over your tenant. You don't rubber stamp, you interrogate. What scopes? For whom? For how long? And why? Secure by default update. Tighten your baselines. New tenants often lean towards stricter consent by default, but legacy tenants? They're loose. Fix it. Create tiered policies. Tier, no user consent. Tier 1, verified publishers, low-risk scopes only. Tier 2, pre-approved enterprise apps with narrowly scoped permissions mapped to business units. Anything outside those lanes? Admin workflow, full review, maybe a POC in a sandbox before production. Custom permission grant policies let you encode this. Use them. Least privilege patterns enforced. For every app you approve, slice scopes to the bone. If it only needs read of one mailbox, don't grant mail. Read for the org. If it needs SharePoint access, prefer site-specific permissions or delegated user-scoped reads over files. Read all. Deny risky scopes by policy. Maintain a block list. Offline access. Directory. Read-write all files. Read-write all mail. Send on behalf without governance and anything all unless there's a hard requirement and a compensating control. Segregation of duties. Not everyone gets to request or receive consent. Build security groups for requesters in sensitive areas. High-risk apps should be accessible only via access packages. Entitlement management. So people must request access, get approvals, and undergo periodic access reviews. Tie the app to the package, tie the package to the group, and review quarterly. When someone leaves the group, their delegated access evaporates. That's containment. Here's the counterintuitive part. Controls without proof are theater, so wire evidence into the workflow. Require screenshots of the vendor's security page. Demand the list of exact graph scopes. Ask for data residency and retention. If they can't answer, the app doesn't enter. And keep a registry of approved apps with owner, scope list, expiration, and review date. No owner, no approval, no end date. Denied. Everything clicked when teams started rejecting helpful tools, missing verified status and offline access demands. Requests dropped. Shadow, it bled out. Admins saw fewer fires because the kindling never crossed the gate. Set these 3 controls and you collapse 80% of the attack surface. User consent locked, only verified publishers. Admin consent workflow on and enforced. You want zero trust? This is zero trust at the app layer. Not optional, not someday, now. Move, case study, proving MFA and password resets don't revoke OAuth grants. All right, listen up, we're going to prove it. Not theory, a clean, controlled run that shows why your precious MFA and password resets don't touch OAuth grants. Setup, 1 normal user, 1 shiny productivity sync app. Requested scopes, mail, read and offline access. That's read mailbox plus persistence. User hits a legit Microsoft consent screen, sees the tidy scope list, clicks accept, mission starts, action. The attacker doesn't guess passwords. They don't spray logins. They use Microsoft Graph with the app's tokens. First call, get me messages to read the inbox. Quiet. No sign-in prompt. No push notification. The app operates as the user because the user invited it. The attacker scripts it to pull attachments every 15 minutes and stash them off tenant. They add a mailbox rule via graph to flag certain vendors for quick exfil. Now the blue team wakes up. They force the user to reset their password. They enforce MFA with a new device. They brag, "We cut off access." You call that a shutdown. Watch this. Persistence. The malicious app already has a refresh token. The app trades refresh for new access tokens on schedule. No password required. No MFA required. Authentication is done. Authorization is in effect. The graph calls keep succeeding. The mailbox keeps streaming. The forwarding rule keeps working. The attacker's script never breaks stride. Hours later, days later, still pulling. Because nothing in a password reset revokes the grant object. Escalation path. If that consent had been approved by an admin with application permissions, say, mail, read for the organization or directory, readwrite.all, the blast radius jumps from 1 mailbox to tenant-wide exposure. That means reading any mailbox in scope, harvesting SharePoint via files, read all, enumerating users, modifying directory attributes, even planting new secrets in existing apps. Admin consent acts like a master key. 1 click, massive surface. That's why we block unverified publishers and shove risky requests into the admin workflow. You stop this escalation before it starts. Remediation pivot. Here's the only lever that works. Revoke the app's permissions. Enterprise applications find the malicious service principal. Permissions, remove grant. Alternatively, graph, delete the OAuth to permission. grant tied to that service principal and user. Instantly, the refresh token flow fails. Next token exchange, denied. The stream stops. The mailbox rule is still there, but the app can't call graph. That's the control that matters. Not the password, not the MFA device. The grant. Lesson. Identity events aren't app permission events. Password resets, MFA re-registrations, and forced sign-outs are user authentication controls. OAuth consent sits under application authorization. Different objects, different life cycles, different kill switches govern OAuth grants separately, or you'll celebrate while the attacker quietly continues extraction. Microproof. Before revocation, run a test. Call get me messages with the app's access token. 200. OK. After revocation, try the same call. 401 or 403. Token invalid or insufficient privileges. That's your red versus blue scoreboard. No debate, no maybe. Either the grant exists or it doesn't. Here's what most people miss. Offline access is not nice to have. It's a time machine. It lets the app come back tomorrow without you. Pair it with mail, read files, read-write-all, or directory. And you've built a bunker for the enemy. Your audit will show the login storm you expected never happened because there was no storm. Just steady API calls that looked like business as usual. Final takeaway from this drill. Revoke grants, or you are rehearsing failure. You don't negotiate with malicious service principals. You delete them. You invalidate their secrets. You cut the OAuth to permission grant and you verify with a failed graph call. Then, and only then, does the attacker lose access. Move. Detection, logs, queries, and what to flag immediately. All right, listen up. Find it fast. Then crush it faster. We hunt 3 trails: audit logs, sign-in context, and live inventory via graph/PowerShell. You flag risky scopes, unknown apps, and tenant-wide consents like they're explosives. Audit targets first. You're looking for the birth of badness. Add service principal OAuth to permissio N grant. That's a new delegated grant. Treat it as a tripwire. Update application. Someone changed an app manifest or permissions. Could be backdooring. Add password credential. Add key credential. New client secret or cert added to a service principal. Persistence attempt. In Microsoft Defender or Entra Audit, filter on activity display name for those 3, then pivot on target resources to pull AppID, service principal, and the actor. You see unfamiliar app names or random guide labels, red flag. You see grants created outside business hours or from odd IPs, double red. Now sign in and consent anomalies. Even though the app uses tokens without your login, the initial consent often leaves a trail. Check. New app IDs appearing in the tenant, consent events tied to geographic outliers, user agents that scream automation, not browsers. Here's what most people miss. The scope list tells you intent, suspicious scopes to flag immediately, offline access, persistence badge. If present with anything juicy, escalate. Mail, read or mail, read-write, inbox data, attachment theft. Files, read.all or files, read-write.all, SharePoint, OneDrive, sweep directory, read-write-all, identity pivot and tenant tampering, chat, read-write, channel message, read-all, Teams impersonation and data mining. You call that a low-risk scope? No, these are call the sergeant scopes. Create alert rules that trigger on new grants containing any of these, especially if granted tenant-wide or by admin. Portal time. Enterprise applications, permissions, sort by granted by. Unknown owner. That app gets a full frisk. Check admin consent requests. Any pending or recently approved items with risky scopes or unverified publishers. Review immediately. Build a risky app inventory. Unverified publisher, last used over 30 days but still holding high privilege scopes. Or apps granted to privileged users. Now drop and give me inventory discipline. Use Graph or PowerShell to enumerate everything. With Microsoft Graph, list service principals, get service principals, selector ID, app ID, display name, publisher name, verified, publisher, Pull OAuth grants. Get OAuth 2 permission. Grants. Filter client ID EQ service principal id. For user level view, get user/IDs to OAuth permission grants. You want the scope field. Parse it. If it contains offline access, mail, files, all directory. Tag it. Also check consent type. All principals means admin tenant-wide consent. That's a siren. With PowerShell, grab OAuth 2 permission grants and cross-join with service principal data to map who granted what to whom. Then slice by high-value accounts, admins, executives. Apps with no verified publisher, grants created in the last 7 days. Here's the counterintuitive part. Sometimes the only visible motion is an update application followed by an add password credential on a legit enterprise app. That's app backdooring. Pull the app's required resource access and compare deltas over time. If risky scopes appeared recently, treat it like an intrusion. Alerting rules. Build automation to fire on any new tenant-wide consent. Consent type, it's all principals. Fire on any new grant with offline access plus mail or files. All. Fire when a non-verified publisher receives any consent. Fire when directory, read, write. All or app role assignment, read, write. All shows up anywhere. Fire when add password, credential occurs on an app you consider crown jewels. Tie alerts to enrichment. Include API ID, display name, publisher, verified status, scopes, granted by, consent type, created date time, and the granting IP location. If your alert doesn't tell responders exactly what was granted and by whom, it slows the kill chain. Microcheck. Grab one suspicious app, test access. Use its token to call a harmless endpoint like get me. If it returns 200 for a user who never installed it, you've got delegated access misscoped. If an app claims application permissions, test an org-wide endpoint like get users, top on one with the app token. If that returns data, your tenant just handed it the keys. Portal views again. Enterprise applications, activity, sign-ins. You might see service principal sign-in patterns. Volume spikes. Regular 15-minute calls aligned with exfil scripts. That's persistence rhythm. Combine with Azure AD Audit to confirm when the grant started. The simple version is this. If you're not watching grants, you're not watching access. Build dashboards for new grants per day by scope risk. Apps by verified status versus privilege. Grants to privileged users. Long-lived grants older than 90 days. Remember this detail. Offline access next to all is a grenade with the pin out. When your rules catch it, you don't negotiate. You escalate, investigate, and prepare to revoke. Move. Remediation and hardening. Purge. Review. Enforce. Repeat. All right, listen up. We found it. Now we kill it. Then we weld the door shut. Immediate kill chain. Step 1. Revoke the grants. Enterprise applications. Select the malicious service principal. Permissions. Remove every grant. Or via graph. Delete the OAuth 2 permission grant objects tied to that app. Step 2. Invalidate the app's ability to authenticate. Remove secrets and certificates. Add password credential was the problem. Now you remove password credential. If the app is yours but backdoored, rotate secrets and certs. If it's rogue, delete the service principal outright. Step 3. Block future calls. Conditional access policy that denies the app's client ID while you clean. Verify the takedown. Retest with the same token. Expect 401 1403. If you still get 200, you missed a grant or left an app role assignment. Keep cutting. Scope assessment. You report it. Pull mailbox audit and SharePoint file access around the grant's created date time. Identify which users, sites, and teams were touched. Export the scope list from the grant and map to data domains, mail, files, directory, teams. If directory was present, check for added app roles, new credentials on legit apps, and sudden group membership changes. Anything privileged gets a forensic sweep. Rotate secrets where applicable and purge inbox rules the app created. Policy hardening, you already know the drill. Lock user consent, require verified publishers, enforce admin consent workflow. But you're not done. Encode a deny by default, permission grant policy that blocks offline access, and all scopes from user consent. Tie the admin consent workflow to approver groups with no overlap to app owners. Require expiration on every approval. If an app truly needs application permissions, force a service account, separate secret storage, and compensating monitoring. Access reviews, quarterly, non-negotiable. Enterprise applications. Access reviews for app permissions. Review apps by business unit, owner, and privilege tier. Any app with no listed owner is out. Any app unused for 60-90 days gets cut or justified. Use entitlement management access packages for high-risk apps. Users request, approvers approve, and reviews prune. When the package expires, delegated access ends. That's lifecycle, not hope. Least privilege scope list. Build and publish a pre-approved scope catalog. Allowed for user consent with verified publishers. OpenID, profile, email, user. Read. Offline access excluded. Conditionally allowed via admin workflow. Mail. Read single user, files. Read delegated per user, calendars. Read blocklisted, offline, /access, paired with high-value scopes, files. Read-write.all, mail. Read-write across org, directory. Read-write.all, app role assignment. Read-write. All, channel message. Read, all, chat. Read-write. Tie this catalog to your grant policies and your review checklists. If a vendor requests outside catalog scopes, they bring a written justification and a reduced scope alternative. Ongoing monitoring, automate detection rules, new tenant-wide consent, new grants with risky scopes, non-verified publisher consents, add password credential on crown jewel apps, update application adding risky required resource access. Send alerts with full enrichment. App ID, display name, publisher verification, scopes, consent, type, granted by IP location. Dashboards track long-lived grants, grants to privileged users, and risky scope velocity. Drill weekly, yes, weekly. You want boredom, not breaches. Wargame it, quarterly tabletop. Plant a fake malicious app, see how fast the team detects, revokes, and verifies failure of graph calls. Clock it, improve it, document owners, playbooks, and rollback paths. Zero trust means you practice until this is muscle memory. Final orders, purge the grants, review the blast radius, enforce the policies. Then repeat. You don't fix and forget. You fix, prove, and patrol. Move. The one thing that stops this, consent control. Key takeaway, OAuth consent is a backdoor that ignores passwords and MFA. The only real defense is strict enforced consent control at the app layer. Now lock user consent to low risk with verified publishers. Enable the admin consent workflow. Audit existing grants and set alerts for risky scopes today. Subscribe and hit the next video on real graph queries to automate this hunt. Move, recruit.